morning, everybody. Thanks, Jimmy, for the wonderful introduction. As Jimmy said, today is about the future. So I think it's great when we talk about the future that my talk today will be about to the moon. That's the title. And first of all, I have to say, to be frank, I'm so happy just over the last couple of days that I've actually heard pretty much all the themes that I'm about to talk about already being said in a number of the presentations that you guys have seen in the past couple of days. So I think this is going to end up being more of a summary of anything. But no, really, I'm going to be talking about to the moon. And it's kind of funny. I was expecting some people to have some groans and, like, oh my God, let's not hear anymore about the to the moon. But really, I think for those of you who aren't familiar with the phrase, to the moon has, I think, is the sole reason for over maybe 1 million face palms in the internet. Anytime somebody mentions this, it's one of those phrases that was coined in the cryptocurrency community thanks to the appreciation of price and everything that went sort of crazy bonkers after 2013, and then everybody thought cryptocurrencies was about making a lot of money by buying it and holding it like stocks and then just getting yourself rich. So basically, we've seen this sort of behavior in all the cryptocurrencies, right? There's no cryptocurrency has been is innocent of this type of hype cycle, and so you can see that this sort of mentality has unfortunately percolated throughout the entire ecosystem because everybody just wants, at the end of the day, just to get rich from buying cryptocurrencies. And I hope that one of the messages that you take home after these 3 days is that we're resetting all that, right? I hope we're back in 2013 now, and we can stop thinking about getting rich and start thinking about how we actually build a new world economy and sort of making a new financial system. So to be a little bit different, when people say to the moon, right, a lot of people will think about like how do we get there, and that's kind of analogous to how do you build the rocket ship, right? Everybody thinks how do we get off the ground, how do we design this rocket ship, how do we get into orbit, right? But I'd like to talk a little bit more today about our trajectory, right? The path. Because if you're any rocket scientists in the room, I don't know, I know there's at least one physicist somewhere, the trajectory kind of matters. Because the trajectory is literally what gets you to the moon or landing on the moon versus careening into the sun or into interstellar space. So when we talk about the trajectory or the path that we're going to take to the moon, for the world of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, what do we mean? What's the most important thing? Does anybody have a guess? Yeah, well, similar. Growth. Generally speaking, growth, right? We have to talk about how do we grow. So let's talk about that. The kinds of growth. And some growths are healthy, some growths are not so healthy, right? So let's talk about the kind of growths which I think are kind of healthy for cryptocurrency, for Bitcoin. Right? Organic growth is the kind that everybody should be familiar with. It's the kind of growth that nature creates, right? It's seeds getting blown around in the wind and into the biosphere and spreading that way. It's how, through society, common sense knowledge gets passed around. Like, that garlic is a very effective way to ward away vampires. That's the kind of knowledge that humankind spreads, passes along from society to society, and it spreads in an organic fashion. And of course, this is very healthy. And in cryptocurrency space, I'm sure you all know, organic growth is you telling your friends, telling your family that this is something you should look into. And this is spreading the word, spreading the good word, right? It's like spreading a religion. The other kind of growth that I'd like to talk about that's healthy, although you might not think of it that way initially, is growth by what I call acquisition. This is kind of like taking over new territory, or if in a more peaceful, pacifist sense, imagine the early explorers as they went across the pond and went to North America. And they brought with them plants, they brought with them birds and seeds and potatoes and diseases, right? But you can see how this sort of growth, conveyed by humankind, accelerates the natural growth, the organic growth that nature gives us. And so this is also a healthy kind of growth. And I think this is what I want to focus on because as we've heard in the last couple of days, this kind of growth is when cryptocurrency expands beyond its borders and makes the territory larger. not just basically growing everybody's size of the pie or within the territory. So these are the healthy kinds of growth. What about the unhealthy kinds, right? There are definitely unhealthy kinds of growth, which unfortunately most of the world outside this room has been preoccupied with for the last 5 years, right? Besides, I mean, tumors are growth. Cancerous tumors are definitely a form of growth, and I think it's sort of goes without saying that that kind of growth is sort of bad, right? So let's talk about the bad kinds of growth. The first one I'd like to categorize as infinite growth. It's more like a mindset. This is the mindset of speculators and hodlers, or as Craig calls them, hoodlers. I don't know why he pronounces it that way. It's obviously hodlers, which are people who basically buy the cryptocurrency, never sell, because they believe that the price of cryptocurrency, like an equity or like a stock, has no theoretical limits, right? You know, the price of Google could go to infinity, technically. It's anywhere between 0 and infinity. So basically, this kind of growth just fosters a very, very dangerous and self-destructive mindset. Right, this is the kind of growth that Ponzi schemers like to exploit among people because they think that cryptocurrencies just will go up forever. Now, the other kind of growth is the other kind of negative growth is very, very important, and it's what I like to call loopback growth, right? Loopback is more like, it's like a negative feedback loop, or negative in the sense of like negative gamma. Negative and has a negative connotations, not the fact that it's going backwards, right? It's basically the kind of growth that we see brought about to us via ICOs, right? For instance, you come up with a white paper, and because of the cryptocurrencies, you use this idea and you sell it to a bunch of people who you convince is a great idea, and they give you some money. And then you use that to basically create a token, which comes out of nowhere because of cryptocurrencies. And then you promise developers that you can pay them in this cryptocurrency, which is going to be pre-sale price. We're going to get it under the market. And then when you develop this platform, you're going to be able to sell it and make yourself all rich. And then if it doesn't work out, because maybe the white paper was silly and it was a dumb idea to begin with, then what you do is all the founders dump all their shares, and they rinse and repeat. They do that again. Now, that picture I did not Photoshop, all right? So any sort of perceived image that you see in there is not placed by me. I actually found that searching Google for infinite and loopback growth and snakes eating their own tails. So if you Google that yourself, you'll find that image. So I did not place any sort of subconscious imagery there at all. But let me throw some numbers out to you, right? There is a certain project which initially raised $18 million US dollars, $18 million US dollars of capital. So that's real money coming out of the real economy. And that $18 million was turned into a token. And that token's whole premise was to create other tokens, ICOs. And then that spawned an entire ecosystem now, right? And a whole bunch of stuff, smart contracty stuff. And that whole ecosystem, how much is it today? It's $12 billion in market cap. Now, either that means market capitalization is a totally silly term, and it shouldn't be used to measure anything in crypto space, or it means that this thing has increased 1,000 times in value. 1,000 times value. Do you think that this particular platform has brought about $12 billion worth of real economic value to the planet Earth, to society? I mean, honestly, besides the value proposition is on two things, really, two real value propositions. One, the sum total of all the hopes and dreams of a lot of brilliant and really smart developers and forward thinkers, right? The sum total of all that. And then the second thing, which gives it value, is CryptoKitties, right? So I don't know about you, but I think an internet trading game which incentivizes mutation of and crossbreeding of like retarded-looking cats is not worth $12 billion. So maybe it's really $12 billion of everybody's hopes and dreams. In which case, what does that sound like? It sounds like it could be, just a bubble, right? So these kind of negative growths create bubbles. And I know our friend and scholar colleague Dominic Frisby had a good talk yesterday, and he said that bubbles are important. And I do agree that the economy goes in cycles, and therefore there will be bubbles. But if the bubble gets too big, if the bubble gets too large, it affects too much of society, then you have systematic failure, and we all know what that looks like, right? And we all want to avoid that, all of us, even governments, everybody want to avoid that again, right? So if we want to grow our community, we have positive growth, we got to think about the first two positive types of growth. So in Bitcoin, what does that type of growth cost? What do we have to pay to get this sort of good growth? I mean, what is fueling this growth in the economy? And in Bitcoin space, that growth is fueled by something called, proof of work. But I went ahead of myself, sorry. This is the summary of the type of growth that we want, is we want basically a rooted economy, right? I want you to look at that picture and I want you to really take it to heart, right? Bitcoin should be like a very old oak tree, right? It should be something that has its fruits, leaves, branches, everything in the above ground space, but it should derive all its value, its nutrition, from this huge root system underground. Now, what does that mean in economics speaking? Economically speaking, it's most healthy if the ecosystem derives most of its value from businesses which have nothing to do with cryptocurrency, like the fisheries and supply chain businesses of Stefan over there from Norway, of the guys at Brewdog, right? These guys are doing, craft beer. If these people, these businesses come into the system, these are the roots growing, and that's healthy growth, right? We don't want, a tree does not stand if it's just something, growing on the surface. And so what I mean is, like, we don't need more exchanges. We don't need more financial products. We don't need more ICOs, which are just easier ways of moving money around, because Bitcoin is not about money, all of it, right? It's really about growing an economy. An economy is not all about money. Money is not for money itself. So back to proof of work. For those of you who are new to Bitcoin, proof of work is kind of analogous to, let's say, the competitive constructive competition, right? And the best analogy you can think of is like the one that happened between Edison and Tesla, between AC current and DC current in the turn of the century. And so this was a very, very violent, very, very, let's guess messy. There was a lot of mudslinging. It's very similar to cryptocurrency space if you think about it. Of these two, one more of an entrepreneur, one more of a scientist, and they were really fighting over the standards for electricity back then. And this competition was actually very positive if you look at it, 100 years in retrospect, because if it wasn't for this sort of like relentless competition, we wouldn't have gotten the electrical standards we enjoy today, and we wouldn't be able to come and arrive at the almost optimal solution. So proof of work is something in Bitcoin that is exactly that kind of competition. But of course, those of other projects in cryptocurrencies always have the criticism that proof of work costs too much energy, right? Because it is a lot of electricity, and you'll see posts such as this one crop up where some proof of, or non-proof of works cryptocurrencies, I'll blow it up for you there, basically comparing how much electricity Bitcoin mining actually uses, and what if we could use that electricity for something better instead? Wouldn't that be great? Because, that's a lot of electricity being wasted. What is it? Czech Republic. Like the entire country of Czech Republic in 1 year, Bitcoin mining costs that much electricity. So that sounds like a big waste, right? Right? But waste is the subjective term in that statement. What if, first thing, what if you compare what is Bitcoin trying to achieve here? Bitcoin is trying to become, or it could stand to become a global ledger, meaning a global financial system. It doesn't need to replace all the existing financial systems, but it could be one that reaches all countries and all peoples of the world equally. And if we compare it in that sense, then we're really comparing Bitcoin versus like the entire financial system of planet Earth. And then if we do that, what's a fair comparison? So Bitcoin was about 68 terawatts per year, right? Terawatts per year. So if we compare this to the banking industry, that means we're going to add up all the servers of all 17,000 banks on planet Earth, right? All the servers together. That's about 26 terawatt hours. All the branches, every office of Citibank, of Chase Manhattan, of Lloyd's. I took a while to think of a British bank. UBS, all their branch offices, all the power that goes into it, just keeping the lights on in their offices, all the ATMs over the entire world in every country. Or you take all that, you add that up, and the entire banking system costs about 100 terawatt hours per year. So it's still, Bitcoin is within the same magnitude, but it's still less. So that should be the true comparison. So when anybody tells you like it's wasting power, think about like, well, how much do banks use? That's your first sort of response. But more than that, as I alluded to earlier, the notion of waste. What is economic waste, right? Waste is just something that you haven't figured out how to use profitably yet. If anybody's from power engineering, you know power stations use waste heat from nuclear reactors to bootstrap other stuff, to do some other part of the system so that you increase the efficiency of the power generating station by using all your waste as much as you can, right, in a productive way. So let's think about how we can possibly use the waste electricity of Bitcoin mining. And I'm so glad that in this week, I've heard so many different applications of making Bitcoin mining more efficient, because there was a mining meeting on Tuesday, and there were so many great ideas that I'd love to share with you if you come and talk with me later. But if we think about if you could utilize the waste of Bitcoin mining, then basically you can kind of see proof of work mining as a sort of cooperative way of growing a tree, right? There's a lot of work that goes into sort of watering this sapling at first. And then a lot of people are going to waste a lot of cost. And this is a constant cost. You have to keep on, gardening this tree. But eventually, the gardeners who have a long-term view will eventually be able to reap the fruits of this growth, right? So if you see this initial watering cost as wasteful, well, then you're never going to get a tree, right? And another way of thinking of it, and this is a true story now. This is a story which was given to me when I was in Tokyo in one of the meetups by somebody who was actually in the space making this proposal. So what if, because Bitcoin proof of work mining incentivizes entrepreneurs, innovative entrepreneurs, to come up with more efficient ways to generate electricity, right? That's a fact. That's a simple fact. What better way to incentivize developments in power generation and other aspects of the human economy than to incentivize it directly, right? You don't really have to ask permission. You don't have to go to the government to ask for grants. You can develop better ways of coming up with power, or you can compete in other ways. You can get cheaper labor. China has statistically cheaper labor. Or you can have natural resources, which was probably previous to Bitcoin not useful to the planet Earth. But now, maybe those natural gas reserves, or, well, actually, that's kind of useful. But think of some other, maybe you have cold weather. Maybe in Greenland, nobody uses Greenland. But now maybe Greenland is a great place to do mining because it's very cold. You don't have to pay for power to sort of cool down your machines. But since the topic is the future, let's think a little bit more forward. What if because of Bitcoin proof of work mining one day, and a very innovative entrepreneur, like one of those Elon Musk types, thinks to himself, I can make drones, right? What if I created an army of drones and then just fly them to the moon? And what if this army of drones, what if I pair them with a 3D printer? And then I have this army of drones which have 3D printers, and it can gather sort of like silica and moon dust, and then make solar panels by themselves, right? What if then this whole army of drones creates an entire solar farm on the face of the moon? Power, solar power is pretty consistent there. There's no weather, there's no clouds. You get 100% efficiency, and you get the sun shining on it, 24 hours a day. And all you have to do is plug up some miners to that. And then this whole operation pretty soon funds itself. It pays for itself. It pays for the next launch to send supplies there. And pretty soon you have this huge power grid built by robots. And the next thing you know, right, when humans finally get to the moon, get off, do all the extra stuff that's needed to get a manned mission, the moon or Mars, we land, and we already have a working power grid. They plug in, and they pay the robots in Bitcoin, right, for all their labor, right? This is the kind of stuff that Bitcoin brings, Bitcoin allows. So is it really a waste then? Is it really a waste that we incentivize people to use electricity in better and more innovative ways? I can't think of a better way to incentivize innovation than Bitcoin mining. I can't think of a better way to spend electricity rather than keeping branch offices of banks, operating. Although I do work at one, so I probably shouldn't. I may be out of a job. So So that's where I'd like to leave it. I mean, I want everybody to think about the possibilities of an economic system or use of power which has positive externalities, right? And that's an economic term for those of you who are economists here. Positive externalities, the ability to basically derive positive side effects to your primary purpose, which is to secure the financial system in the future, is to basically produce all sorts of other stuff which is beneficial to mankind. Thank you.